Hey, welcome to Integrated Preparedness. I am Steve Smith. Just got back. It's a beautiful day here, as it seems like it always has been here lately. Just got back from going down with the bunch to riding the bikes down on the trails in the woods. Had a great time. Taught the kids some things. You know, kids love learning, and if you can wrap it up in what seems like a game, they just eat it up. And we practice stuff like convoy, some basic principles of convoys and hand signals, and some basic tracking, uh, water crossings, stuff like that. Saw some ducks, did a bunch of stuff. Some number two fell in the water. Seems like one of them always falls in the water, and that's good. That's a life experience. If you can't do life wet, you can't do it, right? uh, Had a couple of things. I've written myself some notes here, and looking down on it, I see I probably should have written it on a big old piece of poster board instead of a small envelope, but I got my readers here in case I get into trouble. But I wanted to mention a couple of things before I get into the meat of this message, and that is, sorry if this camera is kind of jiggling around. It's kind of windy out here. First off, I got the email situation fixed over there at integratedpreparedness.com. I had never used that email much for a large amount of mail, and so I'm not sure exactly what happened, but it's fixed now. So you can. It's always been a business email address. So I don't know whether it was just too much coming in and I didn't dump it in. I don't. Whatever. I'm getting email there now again. So if you want to send me email there, or if you want to do it over at Gmail at the integratedpreparedness@gmail.com, do it that. I'll get it either way. The second thing is, I've meant to mention this the last couple of videos and just always forget. I have put up the first couple of combatives videos over on the Patreon site. So if you're interested in that, they're over there. There'll probably be one or two coming out a week over there on the things that I'm not going to share for the general public, and I don't mean that as a put down to anybody here. It's just this is something that I might share, things that I don't necessarily. Well, I'm not even going to get into it. It's just going to be on Patreon. And thank you for all the people. There's more people over there than I ever thought would be, and that's kind of fun. I get some great comments, and I enjoy reading them, and so it's worked out much better than I never really had any hopes for it, but it's working out great. Anyway, what's the biggest danger coming up here? You know, this coronavirus. I did not have my eye on it, as I've said before. I did not have my eye on it at the beginning when a lot of other people did, so I was a latecomer to all this. But now it is, if you are following the news, and I hope you haven't been burned out on it, because that's easy to do, because there's so much information coming out on a daily basis, and it's important to know. And the biggest danger is what I'm going to talk about here. I was talking to my good buddy the other day. You've met him on a previous video. Sharp guy, keeps abreast of. Not only is he sharp in medical operations, in politics and world affairs, in preparedness and emergency preparedness. He's an instructor in emergency preparedness for a large organization. So he keeps his hand on the pulse, and he knows what he's talking about. And he's one of those guys that when he talks, like I say, I listen. But anyway, we were talking about it, and we agreed that probably the biggest danger coming down the road on this deal is complacency, and that's often the biggest danger anywhere, in any situation. The tendency of people to just kind of blow stuff off, to think that it's not going to touch them, to think that or they get worn out on it. You know, most people don't think that a bad situation is going to touch them. Just ask any victim of any crime, and they'll tell you how surprised they are that it happened to them. You know, you can go down into the inner city, and there'll be a shooting, and everybody up and down the block will say what a big surprise it was. This is a nice neighborhood. This, and everybody who doesn't live there knows that it's not a nice neighborhood. But you tend to become acclimated to whatever situation you find yourself in, whether it's good or bad, and you get to feel that it's normal, and that is a danger. And from that comes an unrealistic view of the world around you, and complacency. The other part is that people have a tendency to be overwhelmed. At first, when something comes down the road, everybody's jumps on board and they're all about it because it gives them something to talk about, right? I mean, it's just like tornado weather or a thunderstorm or a snowstorm coming. Somehow it gets people together, and people are, they're a herd. That mentality in people. People are basically social. They like to talk to each other. They like to have something in common, and these kinds of things give everybody something in common that makes them feel good. And they'll talk about it for a little bit, but they tend to get burned out pretty quick, and then that's where the danger comes in. I was looking at a few things earlier before, and I didn't write down all these sources because I'm not a news guy. And it doesn't matter. You can find these figures for yourself, and it's always better if you do that. Find the information yourself. But a few things here that stuck out in my mind that I wanted to put together here. Just probably last week I read somewhere, I don't remember where, but it was a source that I tend to put some stock in. That they expected for the real problems not to hit. As far as restocking and empty shelves, we've seen that sporadically, spot here, spot there, and in other places it's fine. But they anticipated for this to hit nationwide, and now it looks like worldwide because of news that we see coming out of Australia and Europe and places. They didn't really expect it to hit hard until about mid-April. Because our supply chain is still pretty much intact. There's still stuff coming over from China on container ships that hadn't made it to Long Beach yet, and they're not testing anything. They're not testing anybody. The powers that be make big noises about how they care and they're doing everything in the world that they can. They're not doing squat. Okay. Trust me on that. I have reason to know that. But that stuff is still coming in, and it's going to make its way to the stores. But people are buying like crazy, and so we may not even make it until mid-April, in my opinion, before we really start seeing some shortages. Now, adding to that, and it was funny, I just saw something, I just sent it to a couple of people, and maybe you've seen it, I forget what site it was on. A bunch of fistfights in Australia over toilet paper. Well, I guess that's probably better than having a fistfight over a big screen TV on Black Friday. But these people are really going insane over this stuff. Anyway, a couple of things to keep in mind. The Australian National University did kind of a projection on this stuff, and they came up with 7 possible scenarios that they project out of what could be the result of this coronavirus worldwide as it reaches, and even our own National Institutes of Health and the people in the health field are now calling it I don't know if they're actually calling it a pandemic or not yet, but they're heading in that direction if they're not. The worst case, I'm going to give you the worst first and then the best. Okay. The worst case, I'm not turning around. I'll give you the best case. This is if everything just goes peachy. Okay. They anticipate worldwide 15 million dead. 15 million dead from this. Just projecting out, the percentage of people who are exposed, the percentage of people who contracted, the percentage of people who, actually have to be treated for it, and then the percentage of those that die. And so they're projecting the best case scenario at 15 million dead and a $2.4 trillion global loss in GDP. So we know that it's not just the death that causes, that's not the only problem. I mean, as big a problem as that is, it's not the only one. The other problem, I won't call it greater because I don't want to call it anything greater than the loss of life, but the other problem is in the economy. And as people don't go to work, as people can't go to work, as people lose their jobs because of companies shutting down or going out of business, there are cascading effects and I had a friend of mine go through this just brilliantly the other night. And I said, man, I wished I had recorded you saying that because he just put it out, bam, 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 explaining this. It took him about 5 minutes of everything that would come together in the different cascades to have a negative effect on the world situation. It was brilliant. I'm not that brilliant. Let me just say it's really going to be bad. Okay. So that's the best case scenario. Let me tell you what the worst case scenario was that they came up with, and that is 68 million dead and a $9 trillion loss in global GDP. Now, if that's beyond the ability of the average person to process, I don't blame you. It is. How could there possibly be 68 million people dead? You know, we try to tell ourselves we don't live in those times anymore. This isn't the times of the Black Plague. This isn't the times of the Spanish flu. This isn't the time of this or that or whatever. We have advanced medical procedures. We have science. We have all this. No, you know, don't fall victim to trusting in systems that you fully don't understand. Most people don't understand our medical delivery system. And don't think that just because we live in what we now consider to be modern times that we're immune from this, because 100 years from now, people are going to be looking back at us and going, oh my God, how did people survive back then, right? Just the way that we look back and say, I'd hate to have to walk out to the outhouse in the middle of the night, right? Well, yeah, 100 years from now, we're going to be seen by the people then as being, you know, pretty primitive, pretty basic. So, you know, it's dangerous for us to think that we're in a situation that we can be untouched by these things. So keep those two things in mind. So even if it goes back to the best, 15 million dead and $22.4 trillion global loss in GDP, that is going to have an effect, a global effect, and an effect on every aspect of this society. It doesn't matter whether you're in the lower income bracket, the upper income bracket. You know, the upper income bracket is going to have an easier time. If you don't have to go to a job to make your living, you're going to have an easier time than the people who do have to go to a job on a daily basis, because those jobs may be the source of contamination, and those jobs may disappear also. And as jobs disappear for whatever reason, that means that people start losing. They lose their houses, they lose their cars, they lose their retirement, they lose, you know, they lose the ability to provide for themselves with no income. And, you know, the vast majority of people are in that boat, which brings me to a point I'm going to talk about probably in the next one. I think I want to put one out in a minute, a second, maybe later tonight or in the morning. A second one on preparedness investing. Because this situation does present opportunities for investing in the right time. And I've been telling people in the past, it's not time to invest in anything, but I tell you what, a crisis causes opportunities. You know, and I know it sounds bad. You say, well, I don't want to profit at the expense of other people's hardships. And no, I don't either. But as you know, the realities of the world change, you have to see those opportunities where they are and do what's best, you know, for as long as you're not hurting anybody else, right? So anyway, those are kind of the things, and even whether it comes between the best or the worst scenarios, somewhere in there is going to be devastating, and I finally come to think it really could happen, and I suggest that you do too. And so I would suggest that you do not, you know, don't. I run into a lot of people that have just stopped thinking about it, stopped talking about it. You know, it's too much for them. I don't care. It's either going to happen or it's not going to happen. I'm going to get sick. I'm not going to get sick. Whatever. Well, you know, to the extent that things are within your control, like keeping yourself healthy, like eating right, like taking extra vitamins, like doing those things that we know can improve your immune system or enhance your immune system. And I'm not going to talk about those. I'm not a medical professional or an herbalist or anything like that, but I do the things that I do, and I've talked about it on previous videos. Do those things because if you just throw your fate up into the wind, well, you know, if it blows the wrong way at the last minute, you're going to be going, oh man, I wished I'd done that. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do this? How unfair is life, right? Well, life is life. It's not fair. It's not unfair. You know, it just is. And it's up to each one of us to do everything we can to provide for the best for ourselves and our families and the people who depend on us. So, with those figures. The other thing, yeah, I'm glad I didn't write it down on my memory today, but I did remember. I just read before I came out here, and I don't remember the source on this either, but I do remember as a source that I would put some stock in, that they anticipate that every hospital bed will be filled with patients from this and some other things, but every hospital bed in the United States will be filled by, I forget whether they said the first part or the middle of May. When it gets to be that point, hospitals and these medical staffs, they're already stretched thin. They're doing amazing things with very little, and you would be surprised sometimes how little they have. We all think that these places are just places of miracle work, and sometimes they are, but they are working with sometimes short staff, overworked, overstressed staff, and as they keep getting things in for this, and remember, nobody's getting tested for this. No one is being tested for this. Okay, and there are thoughts out there of why that's the case. I'm not going to get into that on this one, maybe on a future one. But people are not being tested for this, and so we don't know exactly how many cases are out there. And I'm sure, feel free, because I'm sure that most of you out there know exactly what I'm talking about. So feel free to talk about it in the comments about the reasons that maybe people aren't being tested. Okay. Anyway. So if you put those two together, that we're looking at maybe all the shelves starting to show real shortages by mid-April, and all hospital beds being filled by May. And then look at these figures put out by the Australian National University of anywhere between 15 and 68 million dead, anywhere between 2.4 trillion and 9 trillion loss in global GDP, and we are possibly headed for some real tough times. The kind of times that we have thought about, that we have talked about, but in the back of our minds, we always had this hope that it really wasn't going to happen, but it might really be happening. So if there's any doubt you're still not doing everything that you can, I'd suggest you step it up, and so that you can be here on the other side of this, right? And until then, I mean, don't stop living your life. Have a good time. Fill every day with as much joy as you can. And it's just like we always say, you prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. But that doesn't mean that you've sacrificed today for tomorrow. If you're living a horrible life today out of fear and such as that, hoping to make it through tomorrow, well, you're just sacrificing the days that God gave you right now, and you don't want to do that. So, anyway, I'll leave it at that. Probably going to come back in the next day or so, or hopefully by tomorrow, with something on preparedness and investing, because things are kind of getting into that realm now, and it may be something for you to think about. So, as I already gave my tagline about preparing well today in order to live well tomorrow, so I would just say goodbye, and I'm going back to play with the kids. So I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.